The council chamber floated in orbit around Thesara Prime, a massive station where representatives from 47 different species gathered to make decisions that affected the entire galaxy. Today was like any other day. Delegates argued about trade routes, complained about border disputes, and filled the air with the usual noise of galactic politics. Nobody paid much attention when Ambassador Jiwan walked to the central platform. Jiwan was a small woman with gray hair tied neatly behind her head. She had served as Earth's primary representative for 12 years. The other delegates knew her face, but rarely listened to what she had to say. Humans had been part of the council for 89 years, long enough to become part of the background, like the lights or the air recyclers. She stood at the podium and waited for the noise to die down. It took several minutes. Finally, Chancellor Vorak, a large reptilian creature with dark green scales, waved one clawed hand for silence. Yes, Ambassador. Make your report brief. We have important matters to discuss today. Jiwan nodded once. Her face showed nothing. No anger, no sadness, no disappointment. Humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. Effective immediately. All human personnel will vacate council facilities within 30 standard cycles. All human trade agreements are hereby terminated. All human embassy staff will return to human space. This decision is final and not open to negotiation. Thank you for your time. She stepped down from the podium and walked toward the exit. Her assistant, a young man named Dae-hyun, followed close behind. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. But it was the confused chatter of people who don't quite understand what they just heard, and don't particularly care to find out. Wait, what does this mean? Someone called out. Jiwan didn't turn around. She kept walking. The doors closed behind her, with a soft hiss. Chancellor Vorak laughed, a rumbling sound that echoed through the chamber. Emotional primates. They'll be back in a month, begging to rejoin. They always need something from us. Most of the delegates agreed. A few looked uncertain. The Velkari representative, a thin being with too many joints in its arms, shrugged all four shoulders. We managed before they arrived. We'll manage after they leave. Within 3 days, human ships began leaving every station, every outpost, every embassy. In council space, they moved with quiet efficiency, packing up equipment, sealing off quarters, and departing without fanfare. When other species asked them why, the humans simply said, "Our government has made a decision." Nothing more. On the medical station orbiting Caldrus Prime, Dr. Sunhee finished her last surgery. She had spent 20 years treating patients from a dozen different species. Her colleagues threw her a small farewell party. They gave her a plaque thanking her for her service. They told her she would be missed. Then they asked when her replacement would arrive. There is no replacement, Sunhee said quietly. I'm the last one. I'm the last one. But who will run the research department? Her Keldesh colleague asked, suddenly worried. Who will continue the work on the plague vaccine? Sunhee packed the plaque in her bag. I don't know. That's not my problem anymore. She left that night. At the central data hub on Thesara Prime, an engineer named Hyun spent his final days documenting the systems he had built and maintained for 7 years. His Velkari co-worker, Rennick, watched him work with growing concern. You're really leaving? Rennick asked. But nobody else understands these systems, like you do. Hyun continued typing. I've written detailed manuals. Everything you need is in the database. But what if something breaks? What if we need help? Hyun stopped typing. He looked at Rennick with tired eyes. Then you'll figure it out. You're very smart. You've told me so many times. There was no anger in his voice. Just exhaustion. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. I've always known. Hyun saved his work and stood up. The manuals are complete. Good luck. He left Rennick standing alone in the server room. Across the galaxy, the same scene repeated thousands of times. Human teachers left their classrooms. Human doctors left their hospitals. Human engineers left their posts. Human diplomats closed their embassies. Human merchants canceled their contracts. They all went home. The council sent messages demanding explanations. The messages went unanswered. They sent ships to human space to negotiate. The ships encountered automated defense systems at the border. A recorded message played in every known language. Your presence is neither required nor desired. Depart immediately. When the ships didn't leave fast enough, warning shots fired across their bows. In the council chamber, Chancellor Vorak called an emergency session. This is unacceptable. The humans can't just leave. They have obligations. They have contracts. A legal expert checked the records. Actually, Chancellor, they fulfilled all contractual obligations before departing. Everything was done according to council law. They violated no agreements. Then we'll impose sanctions. We'll freeze their assets. Well, they withdrew all assets before leaving, sir. There's nothing to freeze. Vorak slammed his fist on the table. Then we'll manage without them. We don't need humans. We never needed them. The other delegates agreed loudly. A few stayed silent, already noticing small problems. Communication delays, shipping route inefficiencies, unanswered medical questions. But these were small things, easily ignored in the noise of political posturing. On a transport ship heading toward human space, Ji-won sat in her quarters and watched the stars pass by. Dae-hyun sat across from her, looking troubled. Do you think we did the right thing? He asked. Ji-won was quiet for a long moment. We tried for 89 years. We helped where we could. We offered partnership. They wanted servants. We're nobody's servants. But people will suffer. Good people who had nothing to do with the council's decisions. I know. Ji-won's voice was soft. That's what makes this hurt. But we can't save people who don't want to be saved. We can't help people who don't see us as equals. We gave everything we had, and it was never enough because they never saw us as truly one of them. Dae-hyun nodded slowly. So we just leave them to fail? We leave them to make their own choices, just like we're making ours. Ji-won looked out at the stars. Maybe they'll learn. Maybe they won't. Either way, it's not our responsibility anymore. The ship jumped to hyperspace, and the council space disappeared behind them. Humanity went home, and the galaxy barely noticed they were gone. Not yet, but they would. Soon enough, they would. 15 cycles after the humans left, the first cracks began to show. They were small things at first, easy to dismiss or ignore. A message that took 6 hours instead of 2. A shipment that arrived 3 days late. A system that needed rebooting twice in 1 week instead of once in 6 months. Rennick stood in the data center on Thesara Prime, staring at screens filled with error messages. He had tried everything in Hyun's manuals, but the communication relay kept failing. Messages from the outer sectors were backing up, creating delays that rippled through the entire network. It's just a minor glitch, he told his supervisor. I'll have it fixed soon. But he didn't have it fixed soon. The manuals Hyun left were detailed, but they explained how to fix individual problems. They didn't explain how everything connected together. The human engineer had understood the system as a whole, seeing patterns and relationships that nobody else could see. Rennick realized too late that reading about something and truly understanding it were very different things. By the end of the month, 40% of the deep space communication network was running slower than normal. Some sectors experienced complete blackouts that lasted for hours. The council sent out announcements calling it scheduled maintenance and promising everything would return to normal soon. On the agricultural world of Denmark VII, the local government waited for their regular shipment of food synthesis equipment. The shipment didn't arrive. They sent inquiries and learned that the human company that had supplied them for 30 years no longer operated in council space. They tried to find alternative suppliers, but the alternatives cost 4 times as much and couldn't deliver for 6 months. The crops on Denmark VII had failed 2 seasons in a row due to a soil fungus. Without the synthesis equipment, people would starve. The local governor sent desperate messages to the council, begging for help. The messages sat in a backlog for 3 weeks before anyone read them. On the medical station orbiting Caldris Prime, Dr. Sunhee's former colleagues faced a crisis. 17 patients showed symptoms of the Valkyrie plague, a disease that had been dormant for 20 years. The vaccine that kept it suppressed needed to be synthesized every 6 months, and the next batch was due. But Dr. Sunhee had been the only one who fully understood the synthesis process. She had trained others, but the process was complicated, involving precise measurements and timing that required both knowledge and instinct. Her former colleague tried to follow her notes exactly but produced a batch that failed quality testing. The second attempt failed too. By the time they sent for help, 43 patients were sick, and the number was growing. In the diplomatic sector, a young Valkyrie named Miran noticed something strange. She worked as a junior assistant, mostly filing reports and organizing schedules. Part of her job involved reviewing historical records of border disputes. She noticed that many conflicts that should have escalated into wars had simply stopped. The records showed negotiations happening, agreements being reached, tensions cooling down. She looked closer and found the pattern. In almost every case, a human mediator had been involved. Not officially. The humans were never listed as primary negotiators, but they were always there, in the background, talking to both sides, finding common ground, suggesting compromises that somehow satisfied everyone. Now those mediators were gone, and the old tensions were returning. The Thryn and the Keldesh had hated each other for centuries. Only a carefully maintained truce kept them from war. That truce had required constant attention, constant communication, constant small adjustments to keep both sides happy. The humans had done that work quietly, never asking for credit. Without them, the truce began to fall apart. A Thryn mining ship crossed into disputed territory. The Keldesh claimed it was a deliberate provocation. The Thryn said it was a navigation error. Both sides sent warships to patrol the border. Both sides accused the other of preparing for war. The council tried to mediate, but the official mediators were slow, bound by protocol, and frankly, not very good at their jobs. They had always relied on humans to do the real work, while they took credit for the results. Now, they had to do it themselves, and they were failing. Miran brought her findings to her supervisor, a Drexian named Korthan. "Sir, I think we have a serious problem. The humans were doing much more than we realized." Korthan barely looked up from his screen. "The humans were useful. Yes. But we'll adapt. We always do. But sir, 17 different conflicts are heating up simultaneously. The communication network is failing. Medical supplies are running short on 6 worlds. The economic, enough." Korthan's voice was sharp. "I understand you're concerned, but spreading panic doesn't help anyone. The council has everything under control." Miran left his office knowing that the council had nothing under control. She spent the night going through more records, finding more evidence of humanity's invisible contributions. They had been everywhere, doing everything, and nobody had noticed because nobody had wanted to notice. She tried to send a message to human space, begging them to come back, explaining that the council needed them. The message bounced back. All communications to human space were blocked. On a transport ship in neutral territory, Captain Dae-hyun received a coded message that had been routed through 17 different relays to bypass the communications blackout. He recognized the sender's signature. Miran, the Valkyrie junior diplomat, who had always been kind to human staff. The message was simple. "Please come back. Everything is falling apart. We were wrong. We need you. We need you. We were wrong." Dae-hyun read it 3 times. He felt a mix of sadness and anger and something like vindication. Part of him wanted to respond, wanted to help. But he remembered all the times his suggestions were ignored, all the times his expertise was questioned, all the times he was made to feel like he should be grateful just to be allowed in the room. He deleted the message without responding. Then he plotted a course for human space and jumped to hyperspace. In the council chamber, Chancellor Vorak gave a speech about resilience and independence. We are experiencing minor difficulties as we transition away from human systems, he announced. This is to be expected. These growing pains will pass. We will emerge stronger and more self-sufficient. The delegates applauded. But in the private channels, many of them were sharing concerns. Trade was suffering. Communication was unreliable. Conflicts were escalating, and they had no idea how to fix any of it. One delegate suggested reaching out to humanity, asking them to return. Vorak dismissed the idea immediately. We will not beg. We are the Galactic Council. We are the oldest and most advanced civilizations in known space. We do not need humans. They need us. A vote was called. The motion to contact humanity failed by a wide margin. Pride won over sense. It usually did. By the end of the cycle, 3 more worlds reported food shortages. The Velkari plague had spread to 70 patients. The Thrin and Keldesh had exchanged weapons fire in the disputed zone. The communication network was now operating at 60% efficiency, and humanity remained silent. Their borders were closed. Their ships had all gone home. Their space was locked down tighter than anyone had ever seen. Miran sat alone in her small office, surrounded by evidence of catastrophe that nobody wanted to see. She thought about sending another message to Daehyun, but she knew it would be pointless. The humans had made their choice. They had tried to help and been rejected. Now, they were done. She looked at the data on her screen and did the math. If the current trends continued, if the problems kept multiplying, if no solutions were found, the council would face complete collapse within 2 years. She hoped someone would listen. She feared no one would, and she was right to be afraid. 6 months after humanity left, the Galactic Council was dying. Not quickly, not all at once, but slowly. Like a plant denied water. The systems that humans had built, maintained, and quietly kept running were failing one by one. The communication network collapsed first. What had started as minor delays became complete blackouts. Entire sectors went dark for days at a time. Messages that should have taken hours took weeks. Some never arrived at all. The council hired the best engineers from every species to fix the problem, but the human-designed systems were too complex, too interconnected. Fixing one part broke 3 others. Rennick worked 20-hour days trying to understand what Hyun had built. The more he learned, the more he realized how little he understood. The human engineer hadn't just installed equipment. He had created an elegant, living system that adapted to problems, routed around failures, and maintained itself with minimal intervention. Taking it apart was like performing surgery on a patient nobody understood. We need to bring the humans back, Rennick told his supervisor, after another failed attempt to restore a critical relay. That's not possible, the supervisor said. Keep trying. I've been trying for 6 months. We need help. Then try harder. Rennick went back to work, knowing it was hopeless. The system would keep degrading until it failed completely. And when that happened, the council would be nothing more than isolated worlds shouting into the void. The economic collapse came next. The efficient trade routes humans had designed fell apart without constant maintenance. Ships took longer routes, burned more fuel, arrived late with spoiled cargo. Prices skyrocketed. Small businesses failed by the thousands. Unemployment spread like a disease. The galactic credit, stable for decades thanks to human economic policies, began to fluctuate wildly. Investors panicked. The stock markets crashed on 17 different worlds in a single day. Retirement funds vanished. Life savings became worthless. Entire planetary economies collapsed overnight. On Denmar the 7th, the food shortage became a famine. The local government tried to buy synthesis equipment from non-human suppliers, but the cost was impossible. They couldn't afford it. People began to starve. Riots broke out in the cities. The local security forces couldn't maintain order. The council sent aid, but the aid arrived late because the communication delays meant nobody knew how bad things were until it was too late. When the ships finally arrived, they found a world in chaos. 12,000 people had died. The survivors were angry and desperate. Similar disasters unfolded on 8 other worlds. The humans had been quietly feeding half the council's developing colonies. Without them, those colonies starved. Then the wars began. The Thrin and Keldesh border conflict exploded into full combat. What started as skirmishes became fleet actions. Hundreds died in the first engagement. Thousands in the second. The council tried to negotiate peace. But without skilled mediators, both sides dug in deeper. Other old grudges surfaced. The Drexian Empire and the Norval Collective had maintained an uneasy peace for 40 years. That peace evaporated in a single incident when a Drexian merchant ship was destroyed in Norval space. Both sides blamed the other. Both sides mobilized their fleets. Within weeks, 3 separate wars were burning across the galaxy. The Council sent peacekeeping forces, but those forces had been trained by humans. Without human advisors, they were ineffective. Some peacekeepers made things worse, taking sides or using excessive force. The Council chamber, once filled with 47 species, now hosted only 31. 16 species had withdrawn, citing the Council's incompetence and the danger of association. Those departures took critical tax revenue with them, pushing the Council toward bankruptcy. Chancellor Vorak was forced to resign in disgrace. His replacement, Councillor Thalnus, inherited a disaster. She was a Velkari, known for her intelligence and diplomatic skill. She took one look at the situation and knew she was standing on the deck of a sinking ship. Her first act was to attempt contact with humanity. She sent messages through every channel she could find. All were blocked. She sent ships to the human border. They were turned away by automated defenses. One captain ignored the warnings and tried to push through. The automated systems didn't fire on his ship, but they disabled it with an electromagnetic pulse that fried every electronic system on board. The crew survived, but had to be rescued by another council ship. The message was clear: stay away. On the medical station above Caldrus Prime, the Velkari plague raged out of control. What had started with 17 patients was now 300 and climbing. Without the vaccine, the disease spread faster than anyone had predicted. The station went into quarantine, but the damage was done. Dr. Sunhee's former colleague, desperate and exhausted, tried one last time to synthesize the vaccine. He followed her notes exactly, triple-checked every measurement, said prayers to gods he didn't believe in. The batch failed quality testing again. He sat down in the empty lab and cried. Patients were dying. He had the knowledge to save them, written down in careful detail, but he couldn't make it work. Understanding the words wasn't enough. He needed the instinct, the experience, the years of practice that Sunhee had developed. He needed what couldn't be written down. He sent a message to Sunhee, begging for help. The message never reached her. The communication network ate it somewhere, in the void between stars. Miran, now leading the investigative commission, compiled a report that no one wanted to read. She documented everything. The infrastructure failures, the economic collapse, the wars, the medical crisis, the food shortages. She traced each disaster back to its root cause, and every single thread led to the same conclusion. The humans had been holding everything together. They hadn't done it obviously. They hadn't demanded recognition. They had simply seen what needed to be done, and done it. They had filled gaps nobody else noticed existed. They had solved problems before anyone else knew there were problems to solve, and the council had taken it all for granted. Miran included in her report a section titled Rejected Proposals. She listed every suggestion humans had made over 89 years that the council had rejected. Infrastructure redundancy. Rejected as unnecessary expense. Cross-training programs. Rejected as inefficient. Shared administrative duties. Rejected because founding species must maintain control. Economic safeguards. Rejected as too complicated. Every single rejected proposal addressed a problem the Council was now facing. The humans had seen this coming. They had tried to warn everyone. They had been ignored. We did this to ourselves, Miran wrote in her conclusion. The humans didn't leave to punish us. They left to save themselves. We drove them away through 1,000 small acts of disrespect and dismissal. We treated them as tools rather than partners. We valued their work, but not their worth. This is not their fault. This is ours. The report was distributed to all council members. Most didn't read it. A few read it and dismissed it. Only a handful truly understood what it meant. Thalnes was one of the few. She read the report 3 times, feeling the weight of each word. She had been part of the council for decades. She had voted to reject human proposals. She had smiled at human delegates while thinking them naive. She had benefited from their work while believing her species was superior. She had been wrong. They had all been wrong. And now, millions were paying the price for that arrogance. She called another emergency session and proposed one more attempt to contact humanity. This time, the proposal passed by a narrow margin. Desperation had finally overcome pride. Thalnes personally led a delegation to the human border. Her ship broadcast messages of apology, pleas for help, offers of anything humanity might want in return for their aid. The automated systems responded with the same message they had been broadcasting for 6 months. Your presence is neither required nor desired. Depart immediately. Please, Thalnes said, knowing no one was listening. People are dying. We were wrong. We need you, the message repeated. Warning shots fired across their bow. Thalnes ordered the retreat. As her ship jumped back to council space, she looked at the human border one last time. Behind that wall was the help they desperately needed. Behind that wall was the solution to every crisis they faced. Behind that wall was their only hope, and it was closed forever. 18 months after humanity left, the galaxy learned to live with absence. Not the absence of things, though those losses were real and painful. The absence of people, the empty spaces where humans used to be. The children's hospital on Verath Station closed its doors after 90 years of operation. 90% of its pediatric specialists had been human. The remaining staff tried to continue, but they were overwhelmed. Sick children waited months for appointments. Some didn't survive the wait. The families protested, demanding the council do something, but there was nothing to be done. You couldn't create experienced doctors out of nothing. The art gallery on Thesara Prime held its final exhibition. For decades, it had been the center of galactic culture, hosting works from every corner of known space. Human cultural exchange programs had connected artists, funded exhibitions, and translated works between species. Without humans facilitating those connections, the art world fractured into isolated communities. Artists still created, but they created alone. The University of Kresh, once the finest institution of learning in the galaxy, lost half its faculty in 1 year. Human professors had taught advanced physics, xenobiology, comparative literature, and dozens of other subjects. Finding replacements was impossible. The remaining professors tried to cover multiple subjects, but expertise doesn't transfer so easily. The quality of education dropped. Students noticed. Enrollment declined. The university that had educated leaders for 3 centuries began its slow death. These weren't the disasters that made headlines. They were quieter losses, the kind that hurt in different ways. A child who died from a disease that should have been treatable. An artist who never found an audience. A student who never learned what they needed to know. Small tragedies, multiplied across thousands of worlds, adding up to something that felt like the dimming of light, Miran noticed. She compiled lists of everything that had closed, everything that had failed, everything that had simply stopped working. Her reports grew longer each month. Nobody read them anymore. The council had moved past denial into a kind of numb acceptance. This was their reality now. They would learn to live with it. But Miran couldn't accept it. She spent her free time searching through old recordings, watching humans interact with other species. She saw patterns she had never noticed before. The way human diplomats listened more than they spoke. The way human engineers asked questions instead of giving orders. The way human doctors treated patients as individuals, rather than cases. She found a recording of Dr. Sun-hee from 3 years earlier, teaching a class of medical students from 7 different species. Sun-hee was explaining a complicated surgical procedure, and one student kept asking questions that seemed obvious. The other students looked annoyed, but Sun-hee patiently answered each question, never showing frustration, never making the student feel stupid. "There are no stupid questions in medicine," Sun-hee said in the recording. "Pride kills patience. If you don't understand something, ask. Always ask." Miran watched that recording 5 times, crying more each time. That patience, that kindness, that commitment to actually teaching, rather than just displaying knowledge. Where had all that gone? Inside human space, life continued peacefully. Ambassador Jiwon lived on New Terra, a garden world that orbited a yellow star remarkably similar to Earth's sun. She worked as a civilian administrator now, helping manage resource distribution for the colony. It was simpler work than galactic diplomacy, and she found peace in that simplicity. Her grandchildren played in parks where flowers from a dozen human worlds grew together. They learned about the Galactic Council in history classes, the same way they learned about other parts of humanity's past. It was something that happened once, something that ended, something to remember, but not to repeat. Jiwon didn't hate the council. She didn't think about them much at all anymore. When she did, she felt mostly sadness. Sadness for the potential that was wasted. Sadness for the partnership that could have been. Sadness for all the good that might have happened if both sides had just seen each other as equals. Her grandson asked her once, "Why did we leave, Grandma?" The teacher said, "We were helping them." Jiwon thought about how to answer. We were helping them. But they didn't see it as partnership. They saw it as service. There's a difference. What difference? Partners respect each other. They value each other's opinions. They make decisions together. Service is when one person works for another, and the person being served thinks they're entitled to that work. We tried to be partners, but they wanted servants. So we left. Are they okay without us? Jiwon looked out at the gardens, thinking about the reports that occasionally filtered through from the few human merchants still trading in neutral space. No, they're not okay. But that's not our responsibility. We can't help people who don't want to be helped. On the far side of human space, Hyun taught engineering at New Seoul University. His students were bright and curious, and actually listened when he spoke. He taught them not just how to build systems, but how to build systems that others could understand and maintain. Don't be clever, he told them. Be clear. The person who has to fix your work 10 years from now will thank you. He never talked about his time with the council unless asked directly. When students did ask, he kept his answers brief. I built things that needed building. I tried to teach people what I knew. Some learned. Some didn't. Then, I came home. One student pressed further. But don't you feel bad about leaving? All those systems you built are failing now. People are suffering. Program. Hyun was quiet for a long time. Yes, people are suffering. That's the part that hurts. But I couldn't stay in a place where my expertise was questioned every day. Where I had to prove my worth over and over. Where I was never quite seen as a real engineer, because I was human. You can only beat your head against a wall for so long before you have to walk away for your own sanity. So, you chose yourself over them? I chose dignity. There's no shame in that. Back in council space, Miran made a decision that would probably end her career. She used her investigative commission access to copy every file related to humanity's time in the Council. Every proposal, every report, every message, every recording. She compiled it all into a massive archive and made it public. The archive was titled What We Lost, a complete record of human contributions to the Galactic Council, 2,936 to 3,025. It was damning. Anyone who read it could see exactly how much humans had done and how little recognition they had received. They could see the pattern of dismissed suggestions that would later prove correct. They could see the casual disrespect in official communications. They could see the slow accumulation of small insults that finally drove an entire species away. Counselor Thalnis called Miran to her office. "You had no authority to release these files." "I know. You'll be fired for this. Possibly prosecuted." "I know." Thalnis looked at the young Valkyrie for a long moment. "Why did you do it?" "Stu." Miran met her eyes steadily. "Because someone needs to understand what we did wrong. If we don't understand it, we'll do it again. Maybe not to humans, they're gone, but to someone else. Some other species who tries to help us. We'll take their work for granted, dismiss their ideas, and wonder why they leave." Thalnis sighed. "You're not wrong. But being right doesn't protect you from consequences." "I'm prepared for consequences." Miran was fired the next day. But the archive remained public, and people read it. Some dismissed it as propaganda. Some defended the Council's actions. But many read it and felt the weight of shame. They began to understand what had been lost. The final death toll from the cascading disasters reached 43 million. 43 million people dead from preventable wars, medical crises, famines, and infrastructure failures. The number was so large it became meaningless, just a statistic. But each number was a person. Someone's child, parent, friend, lover. Someone who would have lived if things had been different. If pride had given way to wisdom. If recognition had been given freely. If partnership had been valued over hierarchy. Humanity mourned those deaths from a distance. They hadn't wanted this. They had tried to prevent it. But they couldn't save people who refused to be saved. All they could do was remember and be grateful they had chosen to leave before the collapse destroyed them too. 3 years after humanity left, Miran made one final journey. She had been fired from the Council, blacklisted from government work, and labeled a troublemaker by most of her former colleagues. But she had saved enough money for one small ship and one last trip. She flew alone to the human border, to the same spot where Counselor Thalnis had been turned away. Her ship was old and slow, barely capable of interstellar travel. She didn't bring weapons or demands or even hope. She brought only herself and a message she had rehearsed 1,000 times. The automated defenses detected her immediately. The familiar warning began to broadcast. "Your presence is neither required nor desired. Depart immediately." Miran activated her own communication system. "I'm not here on behalf of the Council. I'm here as myself. My name is Miran. I'm just one person. I just want to say something. Please listen." The automated warning continued. Miran ignored it and kept talking. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every time we dismissed your ideas. I'm sorry for every time we took your work for granted. I'm sorry for treating you like servants instead of partners. I'm sorry we only saw what you could do for us, never who you were. I'm sorry it took losing you to understand what we had. I'm sorry for everything." She spoke for 3 days, cycling through different languages, repeating the same message over and over. She ate little, slept less. The automated warnings continued. Weapons systems locked on her ship but didn't fire. She kept talking. "I know you're not coming back. I understand why. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that someone understands. Someone knows what we lost. Someone is sorry. On the third day, a ship emerged from human space. It was small and unmarked, civilian. It approached slowly, without aggression. Miran's heart raced as she received a docking request. The ship belonged to Dr. Sunhee. She was 73 now. Her hair completely gray, her face lined with age, but her eyes still sharp and kind. She invited Miran aboard and led her to a simple meeting room with 2 chairs and a table between them. They sat in silence for several minutes. Sunhee studied Miran carefully, seeing the exhaustion, the genuine remorse, the desperate need to make something right that could never be made right. You came a long way to apologize, Sunhee finally said. I had to. Someone had to. Why you? Miran looked down at her hands. Because I saw it all happening and didn't do enough to stop it. Because I was part of the system that drove you away. Because I need you to know that not everyone was blind. Some of us saw. Some of us understand what we lost. Sunhee nodded slowly. I believe you. I accept your apology. Will you come back? Will humanity help us rebuild? Sunhee's expression didn't change. No. 2. The word hung in the air like a stone. Miran felt something break inside her chest. She had known this would be the answer, but hearing it still hurt. We're dying out there, Miran whispered. Millions have already died. The council is collapsing. We need help. I know. We hear the news. We know what's happening. Sunhee's voice was gentle but firm. And I'm sorry for those who are suffering. Truly. I am. But coming back won't solve your problems. It will only delay them. What do you mean? If we come back now, everyone will be relieved. They'll be grateful for a few months. But then they'll fall back into old patterns. They'll start taking us for granted again. They'll start dismissing our suggestions again. Because the core problem hasn't changed. They still see us as inferior. They still think they're doing us a favor. By letting us help, nothing will be different. It could be different. We could make it different. Sunhee shook her head. Could you? Really? Can you change the beliefs of 47 species? Can you undo centuries of cultural superiority? Can you make them see us as equals when they've spent their entire existence believing they're better than everyone else? Miran had no answer. She knew Sunhee was right. We tried for 89 years, Sunhee continued. We gave everything we had. We helped. We taught. We built. We healed. We mediated. We solved problems. And it was never enough. We were always the humans. Always the newcomers. Always the ones who needed to prove themselves. We were tired. Miran. We were so tired. So you just abandoned us? We saved ourselves. There's a difference. Sunhee's voice was kind but unyielding. Would you stay in a place where your worth was constantly questioned? Where you had to fight for respect every single day? Where you were valued only for what you could do? Never for who you were? No, Miran admitted. I wouldn't. Neither could we. We tried until we couldn't anymore. Then, we left. We're not angry. We're not seeking revenge. We're just done. They sat in silence again. Miran felt the full weight of loss pressing down on her. She had come hoping for some answer, some solution, some path forward. But there was none. Humanity was gone, and they weren't coming back. What happens to us now? Miran asked. You survive or you don't. You learn or you don't. You change or you don't. That's up to you. Sunhee stood up, signaling the conversation was ending. I know that sounds harsh, but we can't save you from yourselves. No one can do that for you. One more question, Miran said quickly. Was there anything we could have done differently? Anything that would have made you stay? Sunhee considered this carefully. See us. Really see us. Not as tools or resources or useful aliens, as people, as equals, as partners. If you had done that from the beginning, everything would have been different. And now? Is it too late? For us and you? Yes. For you and whoever comes after us? Son, he shrugged. Maybe you'll learn. Maybe the next species that offers to help will be treated better. I hope so. I really do. We need willed species. Just quast, to see. Mirren returned to her ship and began the long journey back to Council space. Behind her, the human border closed again, sealing off a civilization that had chosen isolation over disrespect. In the Council chamber, now seating only 23 species, Councillor Thalness unveiled a monument. It was a simple wall listing every contribution humans had made during their 89 years of membership. Medical breakthroughs, engineering innovations, diplomatic solutions, cultural exchanges, economic policies, infrastructure projects. The list covered the entire wall, in small, precise text. At the top, a title was carved in every known language: What We Lost Through Pride. At the bottom, a final line: Let this stand as a reminder. Recognition given too late is recognition wasted. The remaining council members stood before the monument in silence. Some felt shame. Some felt anger. Some felt nothing at all, already looking for someone else to blame. But a small few, understood the lesson. The council began implementing reforms. Not to bring humans back, they knew that was impossible, but to survive. They created equality laws. They established merit-based leadership. They built redundancy into critical systems. They trained mediators properly. They did all the things humans had suggested years ago. It was too little, too late for humanity. But it might save the species that remained. On New Terra, Ambassador Jiwan gave her final interview, before retiring completely from public life. She was asked how she felt about the Council's reforms. "I'm glad they're learning," she said. "I truly am. Change is good, even when it comes from tragedy. But it shouldn't have taken our leaving for them to value us. It shouldn't have taken millions of deaths for them to change. That's the part that makes me sad. All of this was preventable. Do you regret leaving?" Jiwon looked out at the gardens where her great-grandchildren played. "No. We're happy here. We're free here. We built something good for ourselves. I regret that leaving was necessary. I regret that partnership was impossible. But I don't regret choosing our dignity over their convenience. Would you ever go back if things truly changed?" "I'm too old to go back anywhere," Jiwon said with a small smile. "And my children were born here. Their children were born here. This is home now. The Council is our past. A past we learned from and moved beyond." "What's your message to the Council?" Jiwon thought for a long moment. "I hope they treat the next helpers better than they treated us. I hope they've learned that partnership requires respect. I hope they remember that you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone. And I hope they build something better from the ashes of what they destroyed." The interview ended. Jiwon walked into her garden and didn't look back. Humanity's silence wasn't revenge. It was simply the sound of a people who had said everything they needed to say and made their peace with not being heard. They had moved on. They had built new lives. They were happy. The regret belonged entirely to those who learned too late what they had lost, and that regret would echo through the halls of the Galactic Council for generations to come. A constant reminder that some losses can never be recovered, and some goodbyes are forever.